Roses Are Pink, Your Feet Really Stink by Diane DeGroat. There they were, 15 blank Valentine cards waiting to be filled with nice Valentine poems. They were sitting on the kitchen table in a pile as high as Gilbert's nose. Mrs. Bird had told them to write something nice for each classmate because Valentine's Day was about liking each other. Gilbert liked Patty a lot. She had smiley eyes and a silly laugh. That made Gilbert feel silly too. He picked out the biggest card and wrote inside, "Roses are red, violets are blue, your eyes are nice, and I like you. Gilbert." Gilbert also liked Frank. Frank let Gilbert use his baseball mitt once when Gilbert forgot to bring his own. On Frank's card he wrote, "Your name is Frank, it isn't Hank. You lent me your mitt, so you, I think. Gilbert." This is fun, Gilbert thought. He continued to write nice poems until there were 2 cards left, one for Louis and one for Margaret. Gilbert didn't want to write a nice poem for Louis. Louis once tweaked Gilbert's nose until it turned red. He didn't want to write a nice poem for Margaret either. Margaret made fun of Gilbert's glasses, so he didn't write nice poems. On Louis's card he wrote, "Violets are blue, roses are pink, your feet are big, and they really stink." Gilbert thought the poem was funny, but maybe Louis wouldn't. Maybe he would tweak Gilbert's nose when he read it. Gilbert didn't want Louis to tweak his nose again, so he didn't sign his name. He signed it Margaret. On Margaret's card he wrote, "Roses are red, you wet your bed. I think that you have rocks in your head." Gilbert liked the poem, but he didn't think Margaret would. He didn't want Margaret to say mean things to him again, so he signed the card Louis. On Valentine's Day, Gilbert walked to school with 15 cards and a tin of Valentine cookies that his mother had baked for the party. Mrs. Bird let everyone open their cards. One of Gilbert's cards had X's all over the envelope, so he opened it first. It said, "Roses are red, violets are blue, you are my friend, and I like you." It was signed Patty. Gilbert smiled at Patty, and Patty giggled back. Gilbert opened the rest of his cards. They were all very friendly. Even Louis had written a poem for him. "You may be small, you're not very tall, but I like the way that you play baseball. Louis." Gilbert was happy that Louis liked the way he played ball, and Margaret wrote, "Sometimes you are very sweet. I hope you brought nice cookies to eat. Love, Margaret." Gilbert smiled to himself. Margaret thought that he was very sweet. He looked over at Margaret. She wasn't happy with one of her Valentines. She stuck her tongue out at Louis. Louis wasn't happy with one of his Valentines either. He stuck his tongue out at Margaret. Margaret pushed Louis. Louis called Margaret a bad name. Mrs. Bird said, "Quiet, please. Valentine's Day is about liking each other, not fighting." She made the class do workbooks for the rest of the morning. Everyone was mad at Louis and Margaret, even Gilbert. When it was reading time, Margaret looked through all of her Valentines again and said, "I have 2 Valentines from Louis, a good one and a bad one." Louis said, "I didn't write a bad one. Someone else wrote my name." He looked through his own pile of cards and said, "I have 2 Valentines from Margaret and none from Gilbert." Then he shouted, "Oh no, Gilbert wrote the bad cards and signed our name." And Mrs. Bird said, "Quiet, please." At lunch, nobody wanted to sit near Gilbert, not even Patty. He had to sit all by himself. When he peeked over his carrot and banana sandwich, he could see Patty and Louis giggling at the table. Gilbert wondered if Louis thought Patty had smiley eyes and a silly laugh too. He saw Margaret eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like she did every day. Gilbert liked peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and he wished that he was eating one too. At recess, nobody played with Gilbert, and Gilbert was very sorry that he had written 2 mean and nasty Valentines. When they all lined up to go inside, Patty finally asked, "Why did you write bad things about your friends, Gilbert?" "Because Louis tweaked my nose," Gilbert said, "and Margaret made fun of my glasses." Louis said, "I'm sorry I tweaked your nose, Gilbert. You can tweak mine if you want." Gilbert gave Louis's nose a little tweak, and it didn't turn red. And Margaret said, "I'm sorry I made fun of your glasses, Gilbert. I will wear them for the rest of the day." She put on Gilbert's glasses, but she couldn't see anything. And Gilbert couldn't see anything, so she gave them back. In class, Gilbert made 2 new valentines out of red paper and lace. During spelling, Gilbert wrote a new poem for Louis. Violets are blue, roses are pink. I'm sorry I said that your feet really stink. Then Gilbert thought of something nice about Margaret. He liked the way that she always smelled like peanut butter and jelly, so he wrote a new poem for her. Roses are red, jelly is sweet, you smell as good as the sandwich you eat. Then in math, Gilbert figured out that he had 364 days before he could have to write any more valentines. Finally, it was time for the party. Gilbert gave the new cards to Louis and Margaret, and he passed out the cookies that his mother had baked. And each cookie said, "Happy Valentine's Day."